Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. You know how this works. We're taking a really fascinating topic,
hmm
and thanks to your source suggestions, we're going to extract, the really important stuff.
Yeah.
So this time we're going to do a deep dive into Japanese sword drawing, specifically Iaido. And we're going to be looking at this book here, Japanese Sword Drawing, a source book for Iaido students.
Yeah. I mean, when we first cracked this book open, it was pretty clear that it was really focused on the practical stuff for students.
Right.
Those little things that oftentimes, aren't written down in books.
Yeah, like the undocumented parts of the actual instruction, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So what we're going to do today is really go through this book, and we're going to tease out the principles and the practices of Aido,
Okay.
as this book lays them out.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
so so hopefully we can give you a really clear and structured view of Aido
Right.
without too much detail.
Right.
So think of it as like kind of unlocking the essential insights from this book,
Okay.
tailored just for you.
Perfect. I love it.
So we're going to start by laying down some foundations,
Right.
and then we'll look at some of the specific traditions and techniques.
All right, let's jump into it.
Okay.
So the first part of this book, and kind of our jumping off point as well,
Yeah.
is it's called preliminaries. It's really about setting the stage for the whole rest of the book.
Yeah.
One thing that was really interesting right away was it talks about how this author really approaches teaching Iaido.
Yeah.
And the philosophy behind it is really about understanding the why behind the movements.
Right.
So it's not just about, rote memorization, but about actually understanding the different components.
Yeah, that's really, really important. I mean, and it's something I think that even if you're not into martial arts, you can apply to other fields, right? Like really understanding the core of what you're doing, not just the steps,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Now, this book doesn't go too deep into the history of Iaido,
Right.
but it does give you good background,
Yeah.
and it talks about the philosophical roots.
Okay.
Specifically, it mentions, the big influence of Taoism
Right.
and Zen Buddhism.
Oh,
So
interesting.
you can see, that it's not just about being really good at fighting.
Okay.
It's about internalizing these forms,
Right.
almost like, a moving meditation.
Oh, okay. So it's a lot about the internal, the spiritual.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now the book makes it clear that there's actually been tons of different schools of sword drawing throughout history,
Okay.
but a lot of them are, more historical curiosities at this point.
Okay.
But there are two really key lineages that emerge.
Right.
And those are the Muso Shinden Ryu
Okay.
and the Muso Jikiden Aishin Ryu.
Oh.
And it was interesting to me that these two branches kind of came back together
Right.
around 1930.
So they had split at some point in the past.
Yeah, they had their own kind of paths,
Yeah, wow.
but then these sort of, came back together.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So the book itself,
Yeah.
it seems like it's a lot about documenting things that have been traditionally passed down orally.
Right. It's almost like capturing that training
Right.
in text,
Yeah.
It focuses on three styles that are taught in the Muso Shinden Ryu.
Okay.
And those are Shaden, that's like the initial teachings.
Shot.
Shuden, that's the intermediate.
Okay.
And then Okuden, which is like the inner, more advanced traditions.
Right.
And then on top of that, it also includes the Saite Kata,
Okay.
which are these kind of standardized forms that are recognized by the All Japan Fencing Federation
Yeah.
and also the All Japan Sword Drawing Federation.
Okay.
So you can see it's pretty comprehensive in scope.
Yeah.
One other little tidbit that I thought was interesting is it mentions that there's actually three different styles of Japanese writing.
Oh, okay.
Kaisho, Gyosho, and Sosho.
Got it.
And those are kind of like printed semi-cursive and cursive.
Oh, wow.
And I guess that's just, it speaks to the fact that some of these older materials are tricky.
Right. Right.
And this is kind of a more modern interpretation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So then it gets into these conventions.
Yeah.
And these are really important because they tell us how they describe the different forms.
It's excellent. Yeah.
And because it's all about understanding the movements, they make sure to include why a movement is done, like
Yeah.
the rationale,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then the specific steps, and
Yeah.
even like the perspective from where it's being described,
Right.
which is always from the viewer.
The viewer's perspective,
And at
yeah.
the front,
Yeah. That's important because, you need a good frame of reference, right?
Right, absolutely. Otherwise, you're just like, left hanging.
Exactly.
It also helpfully includes the Romanized Japanese and the English translations.
Yeah, which is great for, for those of us who can't read Japanese.
Yeah, right.
Right.
That's good.
And then it uses, the quotation marks for spoken instructions.
Right.
So it's almost like you can kind of hear the teacher,
Right.
in your head as you're reading this.
Yeah.
And then, kind of lastly, in this first section,
Yeah.
it talks about the basic techniques,
Okay.
and those are really the building blocks.
Right. Yeah.
Drawing, cutting, blood cleaning, and sheathing.
Got it.
Now, it doesn't go into like super detail right at this point,
Right.
but it sets us up for all these different traditions we're going to see later.
Absolutely. All right. So that's preliminaries.
Yeah.
Let's move on to part 2.
Okay, sounds good.
So part 2 is the traditional schools of Iaido.
Okay.
And we're going to start with Omori Ryu.
All right. So Omori Ryu is it's a style of traditional sword drawing.
Right.
And importantly, it's the first tradition within Muso Shin and Ryu.
Got it.
And it has 11 formal seated forms.
Wow.
And then like a 12th spare form.
Okay.
And these forms are usually referred to by name and number.
Okay.
So to give you a good taste of Omori Ryu, let's dive into a couple key forms here.
Okay. Yeah, let's do it.
So first up, we've got Shahato,
Okay.
which is the initial sword.
All right.
And the scenario here is you're facing an enemy that's pretty close to you.
Okay.
You draw your sword,
Yeah.
you strike him in the forehead,
Right.
and then you do the blood cleaning and sheathing.
Okay.
So this is kind of a core foundational form.
Got it.
Very, very direct.
Yeah.
It speaks to that need for decisive action when you've got an immediate threat.
I mean, that makes sense, right? If someone's right up on you, you don't have a lot of time to think.
Exactly. You got to react.
Act.
Exactly. And that's something you can see in other high pressure situations, right?
Right. Totally.
Okay, next up we got set 2,
Okay.
which is the following sword.
Right.
So the scenario here is you've got an enemy on your left
Okay.
and you draw and cut downwards.
Okay.
And this is really about anticipating an attack
Right.
from someone that you already know is a threat.
Okay.
So it's a little bit more preemptive.
So it's not just reactive. It's like, I know you're going to come at me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, then we got Inyo Shintai,
Okay.
which is advancing retreating movement.
Right.
And here you're facing 2 enemies.
2? Okay.
You draw before the first one attacks.
Okay.
You cut down the first guy.
Yeah.
And then you got to engage the second one while you're retreating.
While you're backing up?
Yeah, exactly. And what's interesting here is it specifically mentions blood cleaning.
Oh, wow.
And sheathing
Okay.
between the 2 opponents.
So after you take care of the first one, you're sheathing your sword, and then you're...
Okay, yeah, which is kind of interesting, right?
Yeah. I guess I would think you'd want to, keep your sword out
Right.
if you still have another person coming at you.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a more ritualized thing.
Yeah, right.
Or maybe just a pause for tactical repositioning.
Right.
It's hard to say, but it definitely creates a different rhythm
Right.
than what you might see in some other martial arts.
Yeah, for sure.
Next, we got Ryu 2, which is flowing sword.
All right.
And here, you're defending against a downward cut that's coming from your left.
Okay.
And you parry, and then you cut to their left waist,
Got it.
and then you sheath.
Okay.
And the book makes a really big point here about how important defense is
Okay.
in Japanese swordsmanship.
So defense is...
It's often considered paramount.
So it's not just about attacking.
No. It's about neutralizing that attack.
Got it.
And then striking. So
Yeah.
so that parry,
Yeah.
that's critical.
Yeah.
That's redirecting that force.
Makes sense.
Now I've got Jintako,
Okay.
which is obedient sword.
Obedience sword. Okay.
And this one's it's a little different.
Okay.
It involves assisting in a seppuku,
Oh, wow.
which is ritual suicide.
Right. Okay.
So you're basically performing the downward cut
Okay.
after they've used the dagger.
Got it.
And the book kind of goes into the history
Right.
and how to make that cut.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that Iaido wasn't always just about fighting.
Right.
It was also about these rituals and customs
Yeah.
and the precision of the cut. That really emphasizes that duty and honor.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, next up is gakutak,
Okay.
which is reverse sword. And here you're dealing with a surprise attack.
Okay.
It's coming from the front.
Right.
So you parry, step back,
Mm.
and then you strike them as they're fleeing.
As they're running away?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Blood cleaning sheathing.
Got it.
So, the emphasis here is really about reacting to something unexpected.
Right. So that initial parry is
Yeah, you got to be fast.
okay.
And then, taking them out is they're trying to get
So even though they're retreating, it's about
Yeah, it's about ending that threat
got it.
decisively.
Okay.
All right. Next is Seichu To, which is center strengthened sword.
All right.
And this one, you're actually rising from a seated position
Okay.
and drawing your sword at the same time.
At the same time, wow.
Yeah, to counter an overhead attack.
Got it.
And they specifically point out how important it is to coordinate the upper and lower body.
Right. So you can't just be like flailing.
No.
It's all got to be coordinated.
It's got to be efficient.
Okay. And last but not least,
Yeah.
we've got Inyo Shintai Kaiwaza.
Yeah, this is a mouthful.
What does that mean?
It's advancing retreating movement, alternate technique.
Got it.
So this is another way to handle two opponents,
Okay.
but here you're defending against a leg attack
Okay.
from the first attacker.
Yeah.
And then you deliver a diagonal cut upwards
Okay.
against the second one.
Got it.
And this just goes to show that there are a lot of different ways to approach these situations.
Right. Yeah.
There's always variation.
Yeah, totally.
So those are some of the key forms from the first tradition.
Okay, great. That was the Omori Ryu. Right.
Cool.
So let's move on now to the middle tradition,
Right.
which is Hasegawa Aishin Ryu.
Yeah. So this is another style of sword drawing.
Okay.
Within that Muso Shinrin-ryu lineage.
Got it.
And this one's generally considered more challenging.
Okay.
And what's interesting here is all 10 of its forms
10.
start from this drawn-up knee position. It's called Tate-Hiza.
Got it.
And they think that maybe this came about because, swordsmen were wearing armor.
Oh, okay. So it's more stable.
Yeah, you need that lower center of gravity.
And just like in Omori Ryu, these forms are about drawing,
Yeah.
cutting, blood cleaning, and sheathing.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, the book doesn't give a super long description for each one,
Right.
but it does list them all out by name.
Okay.
So we got things like Yokogumo, Tora Isoku, Inazuma, Ukigumo,
Wow.
Iwonami, Urokogeshi, Namigeshi, Takiotoshi, and Nuki-uchi.
Okay. I mean, I can just picture the movements, even just based on those names.
Yeah, right.
Like Bank of Clouds? What is that? I know, right?
But the book does go into a bit more detail on a couple of them.
Yeah.
So like Iwanami,
Yeah.
which is waves breaking against rocks.
Oh, yeah, that's a cool one.
I know.
So here you're facing someone who's really close,
Okay.
and they're attacking your left hand with both a thrust and a downward cut. Wow. That's pretty intense.
Yeah, it's a very direct threat.
And then there's Urokogaishi,
Yeah, repeating pattern.
repeating pattern. So what's that all about?
So this one actually forms a pair with Iwanami,
Okay.
and it's also against an opponent on your left side.
Okay.
But here, you're in this half-standing posture.
So a different stance.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's kind of showing you that, even in a similar situation,
Yeah.
if you change your stance,
Right.
you might have a different solution.
Makes sense.
All right, so that's a little taste of the middle tradition.
Okay. So we've gone from Omori Ryu,
Yeah,
which was mostly seated,
right.
to this one, where it's all starting from this drawn-up knee position.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're seeing different characteristics emerge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so now let's move on to the inner tradition.
Right.
This is Oku-i.
Okay, so Oku-i,
Yeah.
what's the deal here?
So this is the third set
Okay.
of forms in Muso Shinrin-ryu.
Got it.
And it's considered the most advanced.
Okay. Advanced?
Now, it actually has both seated and standing techniques.
Okay.
But the 8 seated forms,
Yeah.
they actually form the basis for the middle tradition
Oh,
because they also start from Tate-Hiza.
right. That drawn-up knee position?
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
So let's look at some of these seated Oku-i forms.
Okay, yeah.
So first we got Kasumi, which is mist.
Okay.
So here you're facing an opponent who's sitting right across from you.
Oh, wow. Okay, so like close quarters.
Yeah, really close.
Okay.
You draw and cut to their temple
Okay.
and then follow that with a downward cut.
Got it.
And that mist imagery, it suggests like a really sudden attack.
Yeah, very quick. Right, like you can't even see it coming.
Exactly.
Okay, and then there's Sunagakoi.
Yeah, so enclosed shin.
Enclosed shin. Okay.
And this one is almost identical to Tora Isoku
Okay.
from Aishin Ryu.
Right.
But the difference is you're reacting much quicker to an
Okay.
attack on your right foot.
Oh, okay.
So they're coming at you. You got to react, boom,
Right.
and draw in a way that kind of constrains their movement.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's really subtle.
Right. So it's not just about the cut. It's also about controlling
Exactly.
their movement.
Yeah.
Oh.
It shows you the level of detail
Right.
at this stage.
Yeah.
All right, now we got Shihogiri, which is 4-directional cut.
Oh, okay.
This one's really interesting.
Right.
You're drawing, and then you're attacking enemies
Okay.
that are all around you.
Wow.
Front, back, right, left.
All directions.
Yeah. You got to deal with all of them.
So this is like you're surrounded.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the book even tells you the order.
Okay. Yeah.
Back, right, left, then front.
Okay. Why that order?
Well, it's about prioritizing, right?
Okay.
You take out the most immediate threat,
Okay.
which would be the guy behind you.
Makes sense.
Okay, then we got Tozume, which is enclosing doors. And this one's really visual.
Okay.
So picture this. 2 enemies.
Yeah.
They pop out of sliding doors on your left and right.
Oh, wow. So like they're flanking you.
Exactly.
Right.
You got to attack the one on your right,
Right.
first
Okay.
diagonal cut,
Okay.
and then you engage the one on the left.
Got it.
Now the book mentions how this is like, a traditional Japanese house.
Right.
So you're in this tight space.
It's a very specific context.
Exactly.
Okay.
All right. And then Ryozoom,
Ryozoom. Okay.
which is both enclosed.
All right.
So here you're in a really narrow space.
Okay. Still confined.
Yeah, you're trapped
Okay.
with an enemy,
Right.
and you draw with a thrust
Oh, okay.
and then a downward cut.
Got it.
So the space is dictating how you're drawing.
You can't do a big, wide.
No, there's no room.
Right.
You got to be tight.
Got it.
So those are some of the seated forms.
Okay, great. So that was Oku II, seated.
Yeah.
What about the standing techniques?
All right. So we've got 13 of those.
Wow. Okay.
And get a little more, complex.
Right.
Your stand. So you've got more mobility.
You got more options.
Yeah. So
Okay.
one example is Yukichur,
Yeah.
a company.
Right.
And this one, you got 2 enemies walking on either side of you.
Oh, okay. Like they're
Yeah. You got to attack the one on your right first.
okay. So even though it's 2 opponents, there's a specific reason why you're
Yeah.
starting with the right.
Yeah. It could be positioning, or maybe they seem like a bigger threat.
Yeah.
And then there's, Makuri,
So Makuri, okay.
all rolled up.
All rolled up. Okay.
So in this one, you got 5 enemies coming at you from the front,
5. Wow.
one after the other.
Okay.
So you got to use 5 different cuts
Wow.
and this flowing parry.
So you're parrying and cutting and parrying and cutting.
Yeah, it's like this continuous defense.
Wow, that sounds intense.
Yeah, it's all about dealing with like a huge onslaught.
Right.
So, I mean, it's just a small sample of what's in the book,
Right.
but you can see how much depth there is
Right.
in Iaido.
Absolutely,
And
yeah.
how much variation.
Yeah, from close quarters to multiple opponents to, specific directions of attack.
To Meisai.
So I think we've given the listener a good foundation here.
Yeah, I think so.
Right.
We've talked about the different philosophies.
Yeah.
We've talked about the different schools, how they're
Yeah.
structured.
Omori Ryu,
Yeah.
Aishin Ryu,
Oku Iai.
Oku Ie.
Yep.
So much good stuff.
And this book, Japanese sword drawing,
Yeah.
it's really like a window
A glimpse.
into
Yeah.
into this world.
I mean, it's amazing how it takes these forms that were, passed down by word of mouth and
Right.
it makes them accessible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So to kind of recap, we've talked about the philosophy,
Yeah.
we've talked about the different traditions, Omori Ryu.
Aishin Ryu, the inner tradition, Oku II,
Yeah.
and we've looked at specific examples,
Yeah.
you
We
know?
dove into those forms.
We dove into the forms.
So many forms.
Yeah, there's a lot.
But hopefully, this has been a good overview.
Yeah.
It's a complex martial art,
Yeah,
but hopefully this gives you, a better understanding.
absolutely.
Okay, so for a final thought,
Right. Yeah, me.
we've talked about all these different techniques, preparedness,
Right.
awareness, decisive action.
Yeah.
Think about how those principles might apply to other parts of your life.
Right.
Even if you never pick up a sword.
Yeah. I mean, that's often the case with martial arts, right?
Exactly.
It's about so much more.
Yeah.
Just,
right. Yeah. It's a way of life.
Right.
So we really encourage you, keep learning about these Japanese martial arts.
That's
They're so fascinating.
Yeah, so much history, so much philosophy. Well, I think that's a great place to wrap up this deep dive.
Yeah, I think so too.
Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
We'll see you next time.
See ya on the next deep dive.